Greetings and welcome to part 4 of my plant biology microlecture series. We've gone over specific cells and how they work together on the small scale, but let's take a look at the larger picture and see how cells aggregate to form tissues. As a quick overview, there are many categorizations and types to fit tissues into. The main two types are simple tissues, which contain only one type of cell, such as parenchyma tissue, and complex tissues, which contain many types of cell. Another classification is meristematic tissues versus permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues are able to divide, while permanent tissues no longer can. And finally, we classify permanent tissues by their function in the plant, and these are ground tissues, vascular tissues, and dermal tissues. Okay, settle down, grab a snack, let's go. This is going to be a long lecture. Simple and ground tissues are commonly judged as one and the same and should be entirely review for you. These are made of cells we already covered in the last lecture. Parenchyma tissues are made up of those filler cells with many different functions, and they contain chloroplasts. Parenchyma tissue provides support and flexibility for young organs, and sclerenchyma tissues are non-living and provide rigidity and protection to organs. Meristematic tissues get a little more complicated, but we'll take it slow. You know that meristematic cells are undifferentiated, and they are the predecessors for all other cells in the plant. This is because meristematic tissues are the site of constant division and growth. These tissues form three types of meristem. Apical meristems are located at the tips of stems and roots, providing growth and length. While not all plants have lateral or secondary meristems, these meristems provide growth and girth, and are what make up cambiums, which we'll talk about in more detail in a minute. Intercalary meristems are found on many grasses and similar plants, and these are meristems found at the base of leaves. These provide growth and length from below apical meristems and are why you can mow your grass without stopping their growth entirely. Remember, if you cut the apical meristem off of a plant without intercalary meristems, it can no longer grow in that direction. This fact is vital to know while pruning, which perhaps we'll get into one day, but for now let's move on. Vascular tissue acts as a highway for substances throughout the plant and includes the phloem and xylem. These are created by that type of lateral meristem, the cambium. There are two types that we'll talk about today, but this one is easy enough to remember. It's called the vascular cambium. Phloem tissue is typically created outside the vascular cambium, while xylem tissue is created inside the vascular cambium. That is, in relation to the center of the organ, phloem tissue is further away and xylem tissue is closer. This is a cross-section of a typical stem to illustrate what I mean. You can see we've got a type of sandwich with the cambium in the center and these two different tissues on either side. The phloem, remember that's on the outside of the cambium, transports the products of photosynthesis called photosynthates, which are typically sugars. The phloem operates mainly to take photosynthates from leaves who can photosynthesize to the rest of the plant that can't, especially to storage organs and tissues. We'll see photosynthates flowing from these storage components back up to other parts of the plant, and this is also through the phloem. The cells that make it up are all living, with several types that make up the complex tissue. We'll know parenchyma and sclerenchyma, but there are also very specialized cells as well. The most important of these are sieve cells, or sieve elements. These are cells that are stacked on top of each other in a long tube with a sieve plate in between each to form this continuous vein, basically. As a quick side note, the organismal biology book I used from Georgia Tech made a good point that I really want to convey. The vascular tissues are like the plant's circulatory system, but instead of the veins being tubes created by tubes of cells, the veins of plants are the cells themselves. Getting back on track, sieve cells are living but have lost their nucleus at maturity, including most of their organelles. They've sacrificed most everything to become these conducting tubes and rely on our next cell type, companion cells. These cells keep these brainless sieve cells alive, supporting them and providing them with the sugars they need and regulating their metabolism. Transfer cells are sometimes grouped under companion cells, but these cells are those that get this photosynthate into the phloem in the first place and remove them at their destination. Okay, on to the xylem. This tissue takes water and nutrients from roots to the rest of the plant and secondarily acts as extra support. While phloem tissue transports substances both upward and downward, xylem only works one way, root to shoot. The main cell type, tracheids, making up the xylem, are non-living at maturity and have lignified cell walls, much like sclerenchyma cells. These tracheids resemble sclerenchyma cells a lot, actually, except tracheids have pits where they connect with each other, acting like the sieve plate in phloem tissue. and they, transport water. Vessel elements serve the same function, only more efficiently, and are only found in angiosperms, which are flowering plants. Vessel elements are more efficient because they have a perforation plate instead of those pits and tracheids, and this plate is where the cell wall is nearly non-existent, making transport from cell to cell much easier. And then, as with the phloem, there are also parenchyma and sclerenchyma cells hanging out with the two water-conducting cell types. I'll be honest, to this day, I still have a little trouble remembering which vascular tissue is which. It helps if you think phloem sounds like flow and water flows downward. For whatever reason, I think xylem kind of sounds like straw, and you suck water up a straw. It works for me. I don't know if it'll work for you. What is being transported is pretty intuitive. Water gets sucked up from the roots, and sugars in the leaves flow down through the plant. If you're having trouble where they're formed in relation to the cambium, think of us. We can last way longer without food than without water. So we'd want to protect our source of water more than our source of food. Therefore, the tissue supplying us with water goes on the inside to be better protected from outside damage. I hope that helps. It's helped me while writing this so I don't mix anything up for y'all. On to the last category, dermal tissue, which makes up the epidermis. The epidermis acts like our skin, covering the entire plant initially. It protects against a variety of environmental stressors, including heat, physical damage, pathogens, and insects. It also controls water loss and gaseous exchange, and in roots, controls water absorption. If all that wasn't enough, it produces a waxy cuticle on all above-ground portions of the plant for added protection against water loss and damage. The main type of cell in dermal tissue is called a pavement cell, which you don't find named in many sources. They're also just called epidermal cells sometimes. But these are basically specialized parenchyma cells with no chloroplasts, whose main function is to make up the meat of the epidermis. Guard cells protect special pores called stomata, which are often found under leaves. 2 guard cells surround each stoma, which controls gaseous exchange in and out of the plant, the main focus of this being carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water vapor for the process of photosynthesis and cellular energy. The guard cells control how large or small the stoma, remember this is a pore, a lack of cell, gets. Their movement controlled by water and the power of osmosis. Plants will typically close their stoma if they're in danger of losing too much water via water vapor or during night when they're not actively photosynthesizing. Other epidermal cells have hairs used for a variety of purposes. Typically, underground epidermal cells have root hairs, while above-ground cells have trichomes. We'll talk plenty about both of these when we get into plant organs. All right, last slide, I promise. A dermal tissue that certainly deserves its own slide is the periderm, which is the bark. Not all plants will have a periderm, nor will all organs, but in organs that do, the epidermis will eventually slough off and give way to the periderm once the organ matures enough. The periderm is even more protection for plants and is made up of the phloem, or cork cells. These are non-living when mature and not only have lignin in their cell walls, but also suberin, which repels water. Just to recap, lignin provides rigidness, suberin provides waterproofing. These cork cells are created by our other type of cambium, the cork cambium. Like if you're all, the 2 cambiums, cork and vascular, are very easy to remember. And long video is over. Next one will also be long, but hang in there and know I'm so proud of you for slogging through these. And remember, even if you're wearing a hat, sun rays can still bounce off reflective surfaces, especially water or concrete, and reach your skin. Be sure to apply sunscreen to your face when you're outside for a while. You don't have protective bark, and prevention is so much better than treatment. See ya.